have two kids. I have two boys, and I always think to myself, like, the questions they'll have about AI to me are going to be really funny. And if any of them choose to build in tech, which I hope they do, I think it's going to be really funny telling them stuff like, well, when we had to do this, we had to do X, Y, Z. They're going to be like, it's going to be the equivalent of me talking to someone who's talking about like timeshare computing, writing software. Yeah, like working in like the early 90s or late 80s on software.
My kids have never lived in a world where they cannot ask me to like produce a picture or an image of something they want, and for me not to be able to produce it. Like, it is purely a daddy either says yes or no. Like, any drawing they want, like, I have the ability to create it. It's just daddy's the gatekeeper to creating any type of art or song, right? At this point, I played with Suno enough. They're just like, yes. Hey, Dad, can you do like a rock and roll song about unicorns? I'm like, no, I'm busy right now, but yes, I'll later.
Julian, the co-founder and current CEO of OnDeck, told me that he loved forum episodes where I aim to bring the people who are the best at what they do and I bring them together. He told me that he would love for me to tell everyone about OnDeck, and frankly, it's one of the greatest things ever made in my opinion. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned entrepreneur, or anywhere in between, OnDeck offers mentorship, resources, and a very large community which can help in supporting your journey. They also have something which is known as the OnDeck Fellowship, which is a 1-week in-person sprint in San Francisco, which is designed to help you figure out the company that you want to build and with the best person possible for you. And after that 1-week sprint is done, they onboard you into a network of more than 2,000 founders, and which is a very large number. It combines community, software, events, and a lot of different things which can help you in generating early momentum for your product and raise money in order to build it. To check out OnDeck, visit beondeck.com. That is beondeck.com. Enjoy. Hey guys, how are you? Hope you guys are doing well.
Doing good. Yeah, looking forward to it. It's a beautiful day in San Francisco. A bit cold, but definitely a good time for a pod. Indeed. I'm up in Seattle. Andrew, it's nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too.
Let's start with intros. We'll go alphabetically. So Andrew, then Yohei. So Andrew, kick us off.
My name's Andrew. I got involved with computers pretty early on in my life. Really have been building for the last 10 years in early stage startups. My first startup I founded back in 2014. It was an AI startup that came out of the University of Toronto. We were super lucky, right place, right time, right as Hinton and others were really starting, their work was really starting to work. And we ended up building out a company called Ross Intelligence, which I'm sure will come up, although I won't be able to talk too much about it, and that'll come up too. And my current company is Flexpa. We're building something like Plaid, but for the health, in health. So instead of your bank card, think your insurance card in your wallet, and we allow you to sync that into any application you want. And I'm an angel investor. I've made about 55, I think, these days. I 53, 54, 55 different angel bets, and excited to talk about all of it today.
Hello, I'm Yohei. I run Untapped Capital. We're an early stage generalist pre-seed venture firm. Our unique style is that we, and by we I mean I, do a lot of building in public with whatever the latest technology is as a way to learn about it. Done this across no-code, Web3, AI. All of these are just a way to really learn about the tech and meet founders, and through that, we meet founders we end up investing in. Yeah, that's kind of us in a nutshell. I mean, I guess within the AI space, best known for BabyAGI, which was the first open source autonomous agent that kind of kicked off the whole space about a year ago. Yeah, okay. Currently continuing to play with agents and knowledge graphs and so on.
But before we go deeper into AI, I wonder what was your first interaction with AI per se, both Andrew and you?
It's a good question. I can go first this time because Andrew went first last time. I mean, obviously I've been aware of it because I've been in tech. The first time I played with it was, I want to guess 2014, 15-ish. I was the director of pipeline at Techstars, and I found some AI APIs And I remember I did an experiment at Techstars where I had access to all the applications, which was a lot of text. And I found some like online free model where I could just pump in text and get a sentiment analysis across 32 different like personalities. And then because we had fundraising data on those companies, because I picked 300 companies that went through Techstars, I looked for correlations between those sentiment analysis, the 32 points, and their ability to fundraise. And then like published an internal report saying like, here are some personality traits that highly correlated with ability to fundraise. Here are some that negatively correlated with their ability to fundraise. So that was like back then. And then more recently, it was the summer of 2022, I guess, or right the 6 months before ChatGPT came out. It was when Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and DALL-E 2 all came out. That's when I think I heard about it mostly through kind of the Web3 community, right? Makes sense since it was art. And then I started playing with those. And then once I had a DALL-E account, I noticed that there was a text side to DALL-E, which was my first foray into LLMs. At that point, it was Text DaVinci 002, GPT-3 model.
For me, it was I was in Toronto, and I was meeting my co-founder, who I don't think I had agreed to sign up. I think this was when we were still. He was asking me if I was interested in joining up and becoming a co-founder with him, and so I met him at the University of Toronto at one of the labs, and he had built a way to ask questions on Canadian law, Canadian labor and employment law, on an Android tablet, and it was speech to text prompting. And he was like, "Go ahead, ask it a question." And I had just finished law school, and I had written the bar, I had passed the bar. I wasn't sure about that, but I had done a bunch of bar material prep. So I had a bunch of questions in my head from like writing the bar. So I remember I asked it about if there was how many directors of a Canadian corporation, because we were in Canada, had to be Canadian versus from other places. And it ended up like I spoke out loud, and it got me the passages that I needed. And I remember looking at my co-founder on my first startup, Gmo, and I was like, "How long have you been doing this?" And he was like, "A few weeks." And I remember, and like, it's not really like, I can't stress this enough. Like, it was one of those moments that's up there with like birth of a child, getting married. Like, I remember being like, this is the coolest thing ever. This is going to change everything. And I felt that I had this sneak peek at it. And I felt kind of like a little bit like I was walking on a cloud for most of those years, those early years, because I would interact with the public who had no idea what was coming and what was capable. What AI was capable of, rather. And so, yeah, I just felt like it was just wonderful. And I also remember feeling at that time that we already might have been late, which is funny because it taught me a lot about like tech trends and how long it takes for things to hit mainstream, not even from a technological perspective, but just from a cultural barrier adoption standpoint. But we had met and connected in because then we went to YC in the summer of 2015, and Sam was the president, and Sam, during our batch, hadn't started OpenAI yet, but it was about to happen. It happens in like December. Our batch is like that summer, so May, June, July, August. So yeah, we were doing that ourselves. My co-founder and we built that ourselves. We figured out how to create training data, had to do and labeling. We had to do this all by scratch, and like it's, we'll get into it in the pod, but like I definitely feel now it's like when I had chatted with early investors and other entrepreneurs, when they talked about personal computers and all the hardship they had to go through to build software in the past or hardware, I feel like I'm that guy now when it comes to AI, where I'm like, we didn't have that. We didn't have that tooling. We didn't have this. We didn't have that.
Whenever I use the word AI or start talking about it, I feel like I have to do the caveat of like, I'm talking about like post LLM AI versus like pre LLM, like big data machine learning AI. Because I feel like those are two very, like they just feel completely different in terms of like the type of people working in it, like, the requirements.
Yes. And also, you know what else? I think a little bit the in-between phase, because I think we were right in between of that. And it was kind of like, once they weren't formally called LLMs yet per se, like, or they were, that an LLM is an LLM. Yeah. But I'm talking about like the widespread adoption of it. There was like, I would say almost like 15, 16, 17, maybe even 18 at 19 at that point. Before GPT hits, post GPT hits. And by hits, I mean widespread adoption, because I think we had announced that we had partnered with OpenAI back in 2020, but I think GPT was it 3 that people started using?
GPT-3 is when people started building on it, but you still had to do a lot of prompt engineering to even stop it from just like repeating itself. But I think like the earlier GPT companies, like I'm guessing like the Jarvises and those guys, I think that was that batch of like right when GPT-3 came out. And then when DaVinci 002 came out, the quality like jumped up. And that's when I saw another batch of developers join.
Yeah, great way to put it. It was like batch it. And also the companies that were doing stuff, I remember it was like, oh, like all of a sudden in old school, like BERT and other systems, like you were just like, oh, well, all that work we were doing by hand and figuring out is throw that out. Now we're doing this. Like, oh, I'm this old. When we started, we were using IBM Watson. Like that was like 2014, 15. Like we were like, well, what's in the box? And so yeah, it was an interesting time, like the internet or early days of software. Like early people who were writing software, and I'm not talking about like machine code software, but like we could even run it back that long. Like it's just different. Like the hackers out of MIT and then Stanford and then Xerox PARC. And then, and then all of a sudden it's like Xerox PARC runs so that you can have like a tech bus drive a bunch of people from like fresh out of computer science to go to their campus to write software. Like it's just totally different. You stand one of those software developers next to one of those junior software developers now. And I think the same thing is happening and has happened in AI. And that includes all the, people get all excited about AI being used as a marketing term and what's it mean and blah, 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 blah. But I think it's important not to be a gatekeeper. It's important not like if you love a band, right? And then all of a sudden everyone starts loving the band. It's kind of annoying to be the guy who's like, oh yeah, well, I used to like this band before. And I don't see that much happening. But I'm just saying like, it's been really cool to see.
It is. But I see what you're saying, dude. I like there's definitely frustration people who've been in the space for a long time, especially when you see like newcomers come in, and especially if they start getting attention and whatnot. Like, of course, like it can be that like I was there at that. I mean, the people who are on it are adapting quickly and they'll leverage what they've done before.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I have 2 kids. I have 2 boys, and I always think to myself like the questions they'll have about AI to me are gonna be really funny. And if any of them choose to build in tech, which I hope they do, I think it's going to be really funny telling them stuff like, well, when we had to do this, we had to do X, Y, Z. They're going to be like, it's going to be the equivalent of me talking to someone who's talking about like timeshare computing, writing software, and like, working, working in like the early 90s or late 80s on software.
My kids have never lived in a world where they cannot ask me to like produce a picture or an image of something they want, and for me not to be able to produce it. Like it is purely a daddy either says yes or no. Like any drawing they want, like I have the ability to create it. It's just that daddy's the gatekeeper to creating any type of art or song, right? At this point, I played with Suno enough. They're just like, yes. Hey, Dad, can you do like a rock and roll song about unicorns? I'm like, no, I'm busy right now, but yes, I'll later.
Yeah, like you have the fire for now. Wait until well, actually, no, you're pre-Promethean. You're God, and then they're gonna when they figure it out.
I mean, you guys, I was not born, unfortunately, during the time when the internet sort of transition was happening. So what are the similarities that you guys are seeing between when the internet came online and what's happening right now?
Oh, I'd love to speak to that.
I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so first is widespread misunderstanding and not understanding of what's going on. So, okay, let me speak more specifically. There's like a great clip out there of, I think, Brian Gumbel talking about the internet and trying to explain it. There's another one, I think, of Bill Gates on like Letterman or some late night talk show trying to explain the internet. People are just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It doesn't make sense. And I don't see it really going anywhere. And there was a bunch of articles about how like the internet was a passing fad. The internet was never going to take off. And I think you saw that in like 17, 18, 19, pretty strong too. People have short memories. Also 15, 16. But you see it even more now as like the inevitability of AI comes on and people, it's hard. People don't like to change. So I think like, I guess like fear or like pushback is one thing. Another thing you see is a switch from a more almost priestly class of individuals who are 1 to 2 degrees separated from one of the key people who was pioneering in the space. So previous, when you were talking about AI companies, you would say something like, oh, like, tell me a little bit about your AI company, blah, blah, blah. And then you would kind of trace it back to one of 3 or 4 labs. You'd be like, okay, and blah, blah, blah. And they'd be, oh, I was in Montreal. And then I'm like, oh, like Joshua, how's that team doing? Yeah, that's great. And then, or, DeepMind, you're like, oh, cool, Sutton and Amy out of Alberta. That's reinforcement learning. Got it. Oh, Hinton. Yes, of course, Ilya and OpenAI and all that. So there was like 1 or 2 degree separation. And now you have AI companies being started by people who have no connection to any of like the roots of neural networks, reinforcement learning, you name it, a lot of the aspects of what's making things work. And I think that's great. That's exactly what happened to the internet. So I'll land the plane. The internet and early websites, you have a Mark Andreessen. Mark Andreessen, if you follow the history back, why did Mark Andreessen create the browser? Well, he was at one of the universities that had a node on the internet. And point is, he was one of like, I think they were like the 8th, 9th, 10th node. Like it was early that they got an early node there. And then he is 1 degree separated from one of the internet, like that node being installed there. And the folks who were there, they were still there. And he was a student and he was able to track on. And by the time when Mark got on the internet, he could correspond with all of these Mount Rushmore-like individuals of the internet. And then he creates the browser and we go in. So I like to think that in some ways, and the analogy is not perfect, ChatGPT, OpenAI is almost like the browser. And some of these foundational models that a lot of people are using are almost like the browser into this. It falls apart if you poke that analogy even like a little bit. But my point is more around the lines of like, you start to see like, let's go back to that Promethean and the fire reference. You have someone who, if you exalt some of those pioneers as gods for this moment in time, we will. They're here. Then you have these people, the Ilyas. You have the Mark Andreessens, who are 1 degree separated. Ilya very famously works directly with Hinton, and some of their early work on Wikipedia articles and making that work question and answer is really cool if you go back. And that's what I'm seeing the similarities. Now we're entering into, I would say like 90. Well, we're .com. Like we're 2000, maybe 99, maybe 2003, 2004. We'll find out. But where you have people who are building internet sites and who don't know about the nodes. They might not even know about how the internet started. And they're building huge companies and become huge entrepreneurs. I know this, there are great entrepreneurs in the AI space that if I was to have a conversation with them about how this all came together, they would have no idea. And I think that's cool.
To add to some of the similarities, I mean, this is more just observation. I was young when the internet came about, but like I think that the hype cycle, right? This is the first time I like remember just like watching the hype cycle happen. But I think what happens, right, is that when this technology comes, the people who are starting to build with it, who are thinking about it a lot, see the opportunities, see the potential. And so we start talking about what can be done. And then as that message starts spreading, because it is exciting, what can be possible slowly turns into what is possible, or what is, and then it gets translated into what is possible today, which it's not, which then people get disappointed because what people are talking about is not what's possible. And so like, I think that the same thing happened in there, same thing's happening with AI, autonomous agents is a great example of it, right? Like it was first like, the first discussion was like, oh, look what we can start building now. And like, within a few weeks, there's articles about like autonomous agents, like, are they working? It's like, all right, let's give it some time. And then, during that lull is when people are heads down building. And I'm seeing that right now, right? It's like, whenever everyone's talking about something, everyone gets excited, people get disappointed that it's not working, and then people have time to build it. And then you start seeing these things work. So that's definitely the similarity. And then I think that another aspect that kind of stands out to me is just like some people who lean in and become native and just like how much of an advantage they have versus people who don't. And it happens not just at, it happens at every age level, at every skill level. It's just a matter of whether or not you're leaning in. And I think when the internet came about, like some people who were leaning in were good at Google, were good at, messaging, and just like started, have the ability to like just lean into the idea that, oh, I can maintain 100 different, relationships via asynchronous communication. And that was like a mindset shift they had to lean in on to take advantage of. And I think with AI, there's a lot of different mindset shifts in terms of like how to really take advantage of AI. And the people who are leaning in, thinking about it, figuring out how it works for them are sort of just have such a huge advantage in terms of output compared to people who don't.
If we are certainly Andrew talked about, we are in if we talk about 2003s of the internet, what do you think? Like if we go back in time to the 1999 or 1998, 97, something around that time of the internet, and use it in today's analogy, what has really happened between that time, or what really happened?
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to see a bunch of early ideas that are going to get funding, that are going to be great ideas, that are going to work, but they won't work now. So maybe we're going to find people who actually do find the ends of compute right now, and it doesn't work for them. Maybe it'll be a distribution thing. And the analog I'll say there is like home delivery, web van versus Amazon. So, some of the early ideas around the .com era and the gold rush, those ideas actually did end up working. They did end up working, but they end up working about 10, 15 years later as hardware catches up. Also like cloud and other things that just weren't around. So I think we're going to see that. That also means that most of what we're seeing right now is going to feel like the idea of like pets.com. This is what I believe. So we're thinking, what's the lowest hanging fruit to apply this tech to? And that's why you see a bunch of companies doing things like uploading documents and then spitting out summaries, or some of the things like that. I think that is almost like us not realizing how powerful the tools we have now are, and we need more natives, AI natives, early builders, young builders who are going to come up with this. Yohei mentioned, for example, his kids have never lived in a world where you can't generate a picture. What they will come to build in the future will be different than what people are building now, because the horizons of their mind about what's possible will be completely different than us. We're confined by the belief in what we understand the world to be, whereas they will think in ways that we can't imagine. And so the analog, to bring it back to the internet, is you see a lot of things like on the internet and the early push of the .com to be almost like very analog-y things that they're like, and what's the secret sauce? It's the internet. And they didn't really get it yet. And I think we're seeing some of that too. What's the secret sauce? It's AI. So I truly believe it's almost impossible to know what the future will look like. But if I had to guess, and it's a pod, so I get to, this is the whole point, is I think we're going to shift to a world of we're going to cut down on the space between our electrical impulses of our human physical body and computers, melding that together in a way that allows us to communicate on a more fundamental level with computers, and layered that on with neural networks, trying to find a way to bridge getting us connected completely, our neural networks with the neural networks of AI. I think that's going to take us 25 to 50 years. Maybe, but if I'm saying 25 to 50 years, might be 30. Things are happening really quick. However, I think this is what's important. We are going to come up against so many fundamental questions as a society about what we want, what we will allow. And I think the software that we have to update are going to be the rules, the regulations, and the cultural practices, norms as well. Those are unwritten laws that just occur that we all just adhere to. In Canada, you open a door for someone, even from a further distance. They call it the Canadian standoff. So I just bring that up to be humorous around the fact that I think technology, we're going to be in a situation, and it happens every so often, where technology comes up and advances in a way past our perception or conception and what we've ever dreamed of. And certainly there's been visionaries who have told us that we'd be here. So it's not unheard of, but for the general population. And now it's going to be a lot of like updating what we can do with it before it happens. And that means ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's said about what Andrew said, and I believe too, is that, right, there's change is change is multifaceted, right? It's not just technological advancements, but it's cultural advancements at like a global scale and on an individual scale in terms of how we learn to use it. And then, it's going to be a 3-step forward, 2-step back kind of thing, right? Like as we start using a lot more AI, some companies are going to lose a lot of money because AI did something wrong. And then suddenly people are going to pull back on it. And we're going to just see this back and forth where we see advancements, people lean in, we see mistakes, people go back. But ultimately, I think, it's going to continue progressing, right? As we have seen before, like we'll continue to leverage technology. When it comes to predictions, right? There's always going to be extreme predictions on both ends. This is the most cop-out answer, but I think if you just listen to everyone's predictions and took the average, that's probably going to be closer to what's going to happen. And one of those predictions that someone made is going to be right? I mean, that's pretty easy to say, but yeah, it does feel like very early days. I think, as you know, another thing I agree with is that, like, I mean, I don't think we know what it's gonna like. I think it's okay not to know. I think it's fine to have a lot of predictions, but hopefully, what we've always seen is that as these technologies progress, they end up shaping up in ways that no one exactly predicted. And I think that's where the excitement is, right? Is that we have technology that we can use to build stuff that we couldn't have even conceived of, right, a few years ago. So this is when we get to start literally building the future. And I feel like that's how people felt, like, around that time in the internet too, is like, no one knows how the internet's going to be. It's like, let's figure this out. And out of it came, social networks, for better or for worse, and many, many more things.
It's sort of, why is uncertainty really the best place to live in with these things?
Well, that's more of a personal thing. I like uncertainty. It's that excites me, but that's more of a personality thing.
Andrew,
yeah, I love the fact that I exist at the edge of technology and what's possible, and live in a world where I'm not 100% sure. However, my business, whether it's my building of technology companies or me investing in technology companies, is for me to try to understand the current conditions of technology and then make bets that have a higher probability of occurring based off of my knowledge in both building and investing in startups. And so I do think while the overall arc of technology is unknown, I feel pretty good that I can generally know what direction it's going overall. But yes, I think uncertainty and being okay with that uncertainty is also problematic for society at large generally. And you see that has occurred multiple times. And also society has a very short memory. So we're here talking about the internet and how that was, what happened there. There's so many lessons that we could take from that most people don't know. And I think an edge that I have is I just read a lot, and that's why I do, because I like to hyper understand everything that occurred as to the lead up to something, just so I can even say that it improves my odds by 8% when I make bets. 8% compounded could be a really strong thing. So
that's a good point. I guess I'll add beyond. It is beyond my personality. I think as like an early stage investor, right, at pre-seed, if the future of the world seems deterministic and everyone agrees on the way the world's going to go, there's probably just not much alpha at pre-seed, which means even if I'm right, I'm not going to make much money. But if the future is completely uncertain and no one has any idea what's going to happen in the future, there's going to be a lot of upside to being correct. And of course, I have my own conviction within this unknown, but there's probably that too.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I think like the reason why I love early stage building and investing is because I actively believe that you then have agency as an individual in helping shape the future. So as an investor, when you give dollars to an entrepreneur and a team, what you're really saying is, I believe that the future will look like that. That's what I tell myself as an angel investor. When I invest, what I'm saying really is, I believe the world will look like that. That's a world that I can see occurring. I'm not 100% sure that that's going to occur. I think if you said that, you'd be nuts. But I like and so when I hear pitches from entrepreneurs, what I generally am, I try to like almost close my eyes mentally because I can't do it in front of them, or else they think I'm not famous enough to do that, but maybe when I'm older, I could do that. But I really want to picture the world that they're. So I asked myself, okay, so for this to happen, what has to happen around it? Okay, I'm there. And what are the probabilities of that? Okay. And what are the analogs of that? Okay. And how do we get there? Okay. And I just kind of go through. And so we're all in early stage building and investing, making bets on not just the future, but really what the future feels like, what tools we're using. And so I think there's something really beautiful, even if you were to invest or build and it doesn't go the way you think or the way you want it to, there's nobility, I believe, even in my L's, because at least I put my money where my mouth was in the world I wanted to see. And I think that's what makes me excited about this. Because yes, I want returns. Yes, I obviously want, it's great because then I can use those returns to invest more. But really, truly, honestly, the thing that really gets me going, the thing that gets like why I'm in this game is because I really I get to feel like I'm shaping the future myself.
Totally agree with that sentiment. Yeah, I mean, I like what you said about feeling too. I think as like early stage investors, I mean, philosophically, I think there's a qualitative aspect to early stage investing that's hard to quantify, and so I think it's important to train your gut instinct, right? To figure out like where your biases are, all that kind of stuff, and feeling is pretty important for us too when we make decisions. And totally agree. I think it's part of what our job is to figure out like where do we see the world going, like where do we feel like it's going, and then what are the important narratives that will lead us there, and do we feel like this company is going to be an important part of that narrative?
Where is the world going with AI in your opinion?
Please.
Hey, democratizing. I'm a sucker and maybe I'm an idealist, but like I really feel like AI is coming at the perfect time for humanity because what it'll be able to do is lead to extreme abundance. And I don't just mean physical abundance. I mean like the abundance of justice, the abundance of healthcare, the abundance of physical and national security. I think we're going to enter into a realm of abundance in a way we hadn't anticipated. And now let me take that and actually make it real. This is a Hinton line that has stuck with me, and perhaps even one of the reasons that inspired some of his work, inspired me from my second company as well as my first. But every human being could probably do with a team of, say, 5 to 10 doctors. It would be, think about it. 5 to 10 doctors, they meet with us, they are monitoring what we're up to, etc. Think about how healthy we would potentially be. How great would it be if we then had nutritionists? How great would it be if we had 5 to 10 lawyers making sure that everything that we were doing, we were getting the most out of, that we were protected? Wouldn't it be great to have 5 to 10 incredible tutors? We each get our own Socrates. We each get our own Plato. We each get our own Aristotle that we just get to talk to. We're like royalty. We're like Alexander, getting some of the best Greek minds as we frolic about and ask questions. Like, that's where we're going. That is where we're going. And that's the cool thing. So where is the world going with AI? The world is going to a world of extreme abundance, and a world where if you have an inclination towards problem solving or a passion for art or a passion for design, you are now going to have the most powerful tool that humans have ever created to pursue your craft.
Okay.
There's gonna be a lot of changes. It's hard to capture all the changes, right? Like, I mean, it's like, yes, like AI will be able to do a lot more stuff for us, which is great. Which will give us more time to do, as you said, like more stuff that we're passionate about. But it's I think it's worth also pointing out that it's not like a brand new thing, right? Like today, I mean, I don't hand wash my laundry. I stick it in a machine and push a button. I definitely don't walk places. I push a button on my phone and somebody picks me up and takes me there, right? So like it's easy to forget that, like, I mean, these are things that people took time doing. They couldn't multitask. Going somewhere was like it took a few hours. Now I can like jump on a Zoom call while checking my emails while traveling in distances that would have taken me hours to walk. And so, I think an extension of that will continue, but it's not going to be all great either, right? Am I using up all that extra time to just like have fun and do what I want? No, to some extent, I'm using the time to get more work done, right? So my efficiency goes up. I'm spending more time playing, but I'm also spending more time working. But if everybody starts working more, there is that balance of like the expected output of everybody just increases. Then like working more doesn't necessarily get you more potentially, unless we do produce more, which hopefully AI will do. And everything will move fast, but also slow at the same time is what I see. Like it's gonna feel fast looking back on it, but like looking forward, it's always gonna feel a little bit slow. These seem like all cliche things, but those are the things that kind of pop to my mind.
I mean, if I jump in there, Andrew, I'll just jump in there for a second before you speak. But what Yohei talked about, I think it struck a bell with me. I might be wrong, I might be right, I don't know. But a lot of the previous guests that I had, one of the main advice that I've gotten from people is focus on solving the problem and not the technology used for it. But we see companies like Waymo, which is doing exactly the same thing that Uber is doing, which is that it's getting a person from one place to another. What difference does getting AI involved in it does that make? Because you are solving the problem without AI too.
I mean, there's different ways to solve a problem, right? And it's just a matter of like what's a better or worse way to solve the problem. In some cases, right, AI might be a better way to solve the problem. In some cases, humans are. And as the AI's performance and capabilities of AI changes, the question of whether or not AI will be better suited to handle something versus whether humans will be better suited to something, that equation changes based on the technological progress.
I think that every major breakthrough and invention is a combination of a series of other breakthrough inventions that were really big before, and those were a combination of, and those were a combination of, and those were. So why do I bring that up? I think if you look at AI, it's really a combination of a bunch of factors like compute, digital data, and a few other key pieces. And so I think what's the difference is humans ultimately, if you chase it all the way back, we are trying to solve the same problems that all humans since the beginning of humanity has ever had. We want to have friends. We want to have enough food. We want to express ourselves artistically. We want to have national, security. We want to have a happy family life, etc. So you could almost like get our problems down to the pure code problems. And then what we do, we're tool makers. And so we've consistently pushed ourselves, and that has separated us, I think, from our primate cousins. And so, like, to land this plane, I think the same thing could be said about almost anything. Like, what's the big deal about the axe? What's the big deal about the loom? What's the big issue about the steam engine? But it's just a faster, better, quicker, more efficient way. And it generally builds on the inventions and thoughts of past inventions. And so the only difference, though, is I believe AI might be the one, and it's showing signs of being the one that might actually solve all of those fundamental human issues. And maybe it's my unbridled optimism, but I've spent the last 10 years thinking about this, and I've been challenged quite a lot, including in public forums. I've done public debates. I've done all sorts of things. But I really think the big problem for us, what happens when humans don't have a problem? That's a problem. It really is. That might be our problem.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, I think there's two pieces that are significant about, when AI or specifically LLMs, right, is that one is that LLMs, we've built computers and tools to do stuff for us, and we've gotten pretty good at it. But it uses a very specific language, right? Coding language. And LLMs are the first kind of like the translator between human language and computer language. And so these powerful tools that we've been building, suddenly we can start integrating it much more deeply into our lives, into our society, into our community, because we no longer need a translator between them. And the translator were developers, and they were the bottleneck. They were specific type of talent you needed to hire, and you needed to use a specific type of human language to communicate with the developers, who then turn it into code so that they could talk to the computers. But as as people who want something can directly ask computers for stuff, and computers get better at directly producing it, that just creates like incredible efficiency in terms of like, thinking of it as two separate systems trying to work together through a bottleneck versus two systems that can truly integrate. And I think that can turn into something really, really fascinating. I think that's one of the reasons that.
I love that. I love that. I'd like to play around with that thought too a little bit, which is what you're seeing is we created these tools, and AI is going to shift and be not just a tool, but potentially a companion, a tribal mate, a member of our tribe. And that's different.
Yeah, like the tools that are like weaved into our society versus like separate tools that we have to like communicate with and pull back in. And especially if you like, not to go there, but if we start talking about like Neuralink and if we go that direction, then it's going to be truly woven into potentially our bodies as well, right? Not just our societies. Like spoken language was like one of the first innovation in communication technology, but it was, few to few because only few people could speak it, few people could hear it. Eventually everyone could speak spoken language. And then there was, written language, which was, initially few to few still, but like a little bit more, but only few people could read, few people could write. Printing press pushed it more to few to many. One person could write it and thousands of people could read it simultaneously. Radio is a few to many specific to audio. TV is few to many specific to multimodal. Phone call was a one-to-one audio distance. A video, Zoom is few to few. Live streaming is few to many, multimodal, and LLMs. Or actually, so as we get into social media, it was like the first like many to many, right? Social media was like the first many to many technological advancement, and the reason it was possible was algorithms that filtered the input from the many to what we wanted. So it was many to many with an algorithm sitting that enabled it. LLMs, I almost feel like, are the first like many to few. In that, like the LLMs itself are powered by the language of millions of people's writings and millions of people's thoughts and opinions. And I am able to have a one-on-one conversation with that many. And it is enabled by this LLM technology. And I think that's also just a fascinating way to think about why LLMs are so powerful. And I talk about how like it's probably the closest thing we have to like chatting with our collective subconscious today, of course, with biases and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's also a pretty fascinating thread to continue pulling on.
I love that.
Before Andrew, you go ahead with that point, Yohei, can you quickly like run through how LLMs really work so that if people don't have an idea about how they work, they can get a clear understanding of it? Then Andrew speaks about it too.
How they work? Well, I think for specific to my point, how they're trained is that they're trained on large corpuses of text from across the web and from across different databases that we've collected, including books, chats, message boards, and this is fed in as data. And the patterns that are found in the language that people are using in the text that's feeding in helps the LLM predict, the response or the text to respond to an input. And that's probably the simplest version of like how LLMs work that relate to what I described.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I don't have anything to say. I just was saying that I really like the way that Yohei dropped all the evolution and the few to many, and then eventually now many to few. I love that. Only thing that came out in my mind was how neat it's going to be able to converse with history, to be able to converse with our human consciousness since the time we've been able to document that. I think what's going to be really neat and it's going to be niche is like there might be a rush to try to get some old books and old art that's like out there and hasn't been digitized. The Internet Archive does a lot of really cool things about digitizing art form text and art. But I just think that's the cool thing. Like we're going to be able to ask these questions. We're going to be able to engage with this in a way that we never have. And I think us having context as humans is something that I really look forward to because I think you make better decisions with context rather than without it.
Well, to expand on that, another interesting observation I had recently is that as this technology evolves, we do focus on like the biggest model that can do everything, but the technology evolving also helps power the smaller models. And the observation I had recently was that in some cases limiting the knowledge or limiting the sources can increase the value if it's for a specific use case. I have a couple super quick examples, more on the like just context layer. One of the I made like a VC expert tool using Google programmatic search, where I gave it 250 VC blogs and said only return results from this. So when you asked a question, all the answers were grounded in VC blog posts. If you think about it, it's actually just a weaker version of the traditional like Perplexity, which does a traditional web search. But from a founder's perspective, if you know what type of person you want the advice from, limiting the sources actually I thought increased the value, which was an interesting observation personally. Recently I saw a model that was like a GeoGuessr type model, where if you uploaded a picture of some scene, it did a really good job of identifying where that picture came from, and it was a model trained specifically on just image and geolocation as input and output. And I thought that was just like a fascinating creative use case of like the technology advancing. And I suspect there's, to Andrew's point, there's other data sets where like if we just took pairs of the data set, there'd be like a fascinating, like great use case that like even a big model can't do. We just have to like be creative around like what data is out there that we can pair up and use. So that's just a fascinating thing to throw out. But yeah, that was kind of an extension of some of the thoughts right there, especially on the data piece.
Yeah, I love that. Thing that I've always thought about with that has been we're in this bigger models. And that's kind of how cannons and gunpowder was used. We got bigger cannons, and make bigger cannons. Eventually we had these massive cannons that like couldn't move, and it was kind of silly. And then eventually they started making smaller cannons and smaller cannons and smaller cannons than the gun. And I think, not to like make it about weapons, because there's kind of like, well, you know, it's like an analogy, but like give me that aside. I think like AI is a gun rather than AI is a cannon. Smaller models, there's going to be stuff there for sure.
Yep.
AGI is the real cannon. We will get to that later on.
Yeah.
But I mean, what do you guys think really makes models different? Like I saw like Claude released its latest model today. I was playing around. I was not playing around with it. I was just
Sonnet 3.5. I'm hearing good things.
It's amazing. It's like better than where OpenAI is publicly right now. We don't know what they're doing in private, but it's better than 4.0 from what I've seen.
Well, 4.0 was worse than 4, so
yeah, you get the point. So, what makes these models better or worse in your opinion?
I think at the simplest level, like it's good or bad based on if you can get out of it what you want. Obviously, each person wants something potentially slightly different out of it. So I think when I think of what models are good or bad, I essentially think of like what other builders are telling me I should be building with. That's kind of my definition, right? So like, you know, today I had a couple people DM me saying, hey, you should definitely start playing with Sonnet 3.5. To me, that's a good model because people I know who build a lot are saying I should build with it. But yeah, that's kind of a weak definition, but that's kind of how I think about it.
No, I like that. I think there's also this element of high performance. So if you remember like PCs, early PCs, it's like, how fast can we jack this up? How like, what can we put in? And it becomes almost like you're creating a street racing vehicle. Sometimes you don't need a car with a huge engine to do a whole bunch of things. So I guess what I would say is yes, like just to echo the way you know is if it works. But I also think we're in this exciting time right now where like people just want to see what we can throw, like how many more parameters, like how much more data, like how quicker can it be? And that's cool too. That's you know, we're in like our early PC days of like, and the other cool thing that we haven't seen for in a while is like when hardware catches up and surpasses in some ways on software. Like if you think about early PCs, like every few months, someone was releasing a new PC that was better than the PCs before it in performance. And then people would go buy that one. It's great. Competition right now. You need that competition. It's gonna create a lot more advances for us as everyday consumers of it, us as specialist consumers of it as builders. So I just think that that's a cool thing that we didn't mention. That's cool. Like, okay, just like what we said, oh, is 4.0 better than 4? How about 3.5? Oh, I heard so-and-so is going to drop such and such. Like, we're blessed right now. We're living in the best timeline of these drops happening seemingly weeks apart, days apart at times. Like there was like a week there when like we had like 3 or 4 huge drops. So I don't know. I just that makes me really happy. And I think, this 3.5 release, what it showed is like we are nowhere. Like we're still finding more and more performance gains. So that's huge. That's huge.
One thing I also noticed relevant to this when I was talking about builders is I think probably right after the most recent Claude, not this one, but the one beforehand, is probably when I started seeing builders start like a lot of builders use more than one model in production. Like I felt like until then, I knew a lot of people were still just like, I'm just going to use GPT-4 for everything. But now, if I'm talking to people, I kind of expect them to be like, oh yeah, I use Haiku for here, which is the faster, smaller model. I use Opus for this because it's long. I use Opus to do this, but then I use GPT-4 here. And I feel like that's kind of, going back to a good model is what you can get out of it. Right? And people want different, as you build more and more complex apps, you need different things out of LLMs, and people are just figuring out what model is good for what. And then figuring out to use those, and then eventually maybe fine tuning. But honestly, even just knowing which base model is good for what task is like gets you a nice leg up, I think.
How do these models like really get better?
I don't think I'm the right person to answer this question, but if I were to try, I mean, the amount of compute you throw at it obviously changes performance. The quality of data is another thing. And I think that's some like tweaking and questioning, right? Like obviously a lot of data is good, but like if you decrease the amount of data and make it better, should it output better? I think so. There's some experience. So that's another technical piece. And then there's just a lot more like smaller technique changes in terms of like parameter tuning and adding small coming up with small techniques to solve problems. So there's a lot of those, I think, which is where people think about when you're talking about technical competition. And then there are probably, there are still people working on like overhauls and like, is there something better than a transformer? But that's much more about like unknown if I can find it. But if I can find it, like there's going to be huge, there's a huge upside to that. So there's people still working on that. So those are some areas that I would summarize my understanding.
Yep. All that, it's like things like expanding data, training data, the quality of the training data, algorithmic enhancements, the parameters, adding parameters, subtracting parameters. There's a whole bunch of things. And I think that's the cool thing. Like we're finding all these levers, and just like a good recipe, we're kind of thinking this through, like add more salt. Oh no, that's too salty. Add some more pepper. You know what we could do? We could add like honey in there. And, just like we're cooking, they're real cook. When they say let them cook, they're cooking.
But if you double the size of your brownie, you can't just double the time in the oven. Like you have to make adjustments because the volume, and then also like the height of the pan. If you make the pan smaller, the same batter is going to be taller, so you have to adjust the cooking temperature. So there's just like every time you adjust one parameter, you have to adjust another parameter, and with all these parameters, there's so many different combinations.
Yes, and we don't know enough. Like that's
exactly.
Like we need to all be honest, but like they're still making breakthroughs. Like LLMs have not hit a wall. 3.5 comes out today. That's clear. LLMs have not hit a wall. That's huge. What is it? June 20th, 2024. There's a lot more juice to squeeze. Will it be incremental? Will it be exponential? We'll see. But the fact that here's the other thing. I don't think we've already made use of all of this that we have. Like,
yes, even if the model doesn't improve at all, there's so much more, like we can build so much cooler stuff with just where the models are today.
Yeah, I think we're good for another like 5-10 years just on today. And the fact it keeps going, it's like, this is amazing.
Yeah, of course. Why do you think are VC? I mean, you invest, from an angel perspective, I think this would be a wrong question to ask Andrew, but from a venture perspective, you invest in AI. Why do you think you guys not giving more money to companies building foundation models?
Well, we're looking at that later, but at least with the current state of building foundational models, it is costly and expensive to build a model that can compete in the market. So most of the model companies are established people, many of them came from, DeepMind or some of the big labs. They're coming out raising $100 million to start the company. As a pre-seed investor, we just can't get anything close to ownership that that's anything close to meaningful. So That being said, I do think there is a hypothesis that's worth testing, that you can build small models and combine them to get more powerful output. And if there's a path there, right, if somebody can figure out how to do that, you could in theory start a model company for cheaper. So still sniffing around.
How much money, like if we talk about estimates, how much money does it take to train a foundational model?
I mean, one that can compete in the market today using current model training. I don't know how much is it. What is it, like 100 million? Is that even enough? A lot more than that. I don't know. I'm not the right person to answer this question.
I don't disagree with that guess. I would say the cool thing though is like, can you talking about the size? Can you build foundational models that are market specific or use case specific? You can, and so that's tens of millions to get going. Maybe 5 to 10. That's how much it cost us back in the day. And if I could use all the same tooling that we had now, it would be different. But I'll tell you this, I actually think knowing how to build before a lot of this stuff happened is legit. And I know this is what all like the old heads say about things. Like I'm so happy I know how to do that manually because it makes me better now automatically. I think there is something about that with building with these tools, because if you do some of the old school methods with the new school methods, I think you get higher results and more accuracy, and you can hack things in a way that others just don't know, because they just don't have they don't understand what's in the tool anymore, because the tool is composed of multiple layers and it's being abstracted away from the developer.
That's a good point. But yeah, I mean, it is, it kind of comes down to what type of model company, right? If you're a research company, that's one very specific type of company where if I'm investing because they might figure something out, and if they do figure it out, like it could be really impactful. Versus maybe like there's a sector specific smaller model type focused company. That one, I would guess if I was investing in that, I wouldn't want them to be too experimental. More so, I would want them to leverage best practices that's been figured out in other industries and just apply to an industry where it hasn't been applied to. So the way I would judge those two would be probably pretty different.
If we talk about like historical knowledge about models, and if we take Moore's law into account, this question has been bugging me for a while, so I'm glad I have the opportunity to ask this. But so according to like Moore's law, we compute will continue to increase in the coming years, that will keep growing. So will we see more foundational models coming online because of that? So compute increases, the price to train models decreases. Will that result in more models in the market?
I think we will continue to see more models in the market, and I don't disagree that compute will decrease, but I don't know if and there's some correlation indirect, I think, but I don't know if there's like a direct correlation is my thought. Like I feel like models just increase because now that market's growing, and you'll continue to see a couple top models, but now that there's tooling to build models, there's just a lot of reasons for there to be a lot more models. So I don't disagree with both of those statements, but I don't think it'll necessarily be because compute is going, the cost is going down. I think if the cost going down would directly relate more to like inference happening, right? Like it doesn't necessarily, you can have more inference happening without more models technically, in that like the models are being used more because it's cheaper to use. That I don't disagree with.
We haven't optimized enough with what we have, and so that's great. So I think we're going to keep pushing to see where this hits the wall, and if it does, I think Moore's law will continue. I think betting against Moore's law, if you look at it, it's hard to bet against, although everyone, it is slowing down, but we have cool things like 3D chip stacking. We got EUV chip innovation. There's some cool stuff that I think we haven't fully done on the chip side. And then there's other ways that we could go through kind of the resource optimization overall. So I think that almost as a broader question is like, how many foundational models is enough? How much will the market support? How many do we need? I don't have the answers to that. I think that that's a tough one. I don't know what the answer is there. I do know that what will probably mean is we're going to get higher performance. We're going to get, so long as things maintain from a regulatory standpoint, what we're seeing right now, there's a high degree of competition. And I think that's great for consumers. And I think that we'll start to see maybe the rise of smaller players. That's the only thing that I like. My thought here is I think you're going to be able to see more foundational models built for less money, and that it'll be done innovatively. And that innovation obviously is going to come from the necessity of these companies not having enough resources or taking different approaches that we have not thought of yet, because right now they're tinkering in the equivalent of a garage, which now means just like probably like some MacBook in some hacker home in some tech center.
I think the definition, I don't know what the definition of foundational model is, but I do think as we get into more multimodality, you'll start being questioning, like, is this foundational? Or is this like an offshoot of like a bigger model? Because, down the road, I would imagine, right, like there might be a model where it can take in audio, visual, like multiple modalities and output multiple modalities at once. And if that becomes the foundational model, then what we consider a foundational model that just text to text no longer feels like a foundational model. It almost feels like a small model when that becomes a foundational. And then eventually, right, like, we're going to be able to do full 3D scenes, right? Can I just set up a 360 camera that's capturing the 3D scene in audio, feed that in, and get a full 360 scene with audio back? Right? Can I feed in the first half of a game and get the second half of a game back? Can I send in neural activity from an EEG and get neural activity back? And as we start thinking like that, like even if we have more power, we can just like, there's more and more data we can feed in. And so, yeah, I guess that at that point, I feel like what we consider a foundational model today ends up becoming a whole bunch of different industries of different types of models.
I love that thinking. I also think to go like further, I'm a big believer that we're going to meld in a closer way. We already have melded with machines. We just, we tap and we interact with it in a way, but we haven't been able to break through the glass of the monitor yet. I think we are going to. I don't think it's going to be implantables. I think it's going to be wearables that work in a way that's very similar to implantables. And why am I saying that? I think in the future, if we do this right, we might be able to run these models on-prem, meaning on our brain, on our actual infrastructure of our own hardware. And I think that's going to get super cool. And there's going to be a bunch that we could do there, because if you think about the energy needs of these models, they're voracious. They need a lot of energy. I think we're going to eventually come to, that's going to be a huge point and a gating factor. I think the United States has a lot of natural gas. I think natural gas is going to probably be the way that we run a lot of this stuff. But I think we need to start building more nuclear facilities ASAP. And I think we are. There's progress being made on that front. So why do I bring this all up? I mean, a human being can eat a tuna salad sandwich and then use that to fuel models in a way that would require a whole bunch of real electricity. And so I think by bridging that divide, and if we can bridge that divide, we're talking about shared consciousness, both interhuman, intermachine, but then potentially cloud computing on the level of like our brains and us communicating. Yes, telepathically.
X premium users can get paid to let Grok use their unused neural activity.
Yeah,
leverage neurons.
You never know. I do think in the future, ads are going to be things that like you're going to have to like play, because you're going to visually, they're going to be different for you. Maybe you're wearing the AI enhanced stuff, but it's going to be really weird. It's going to be kind of like Obey. But
once we have neural implants, I'm just going to like lay in bed. It's like, oh, okay, I got to watch like 10 minutes of like McDonald's with my eyes closed before my brain shuts off.
Yeah, maybe that's that I hope. But here's the thing, that comes down to regulations, freedom, democracy, the celebration of capitalism, the pursuit of truth. And I think that's going to underpin where everything goes, regardless of the technology. That's why I often say, like, thank God for capitalism. Thank God for the beautiful things that we've been able to do as free individuals in a lot of the countries. And I'm really proud to be building in the United States, because I think a lot of the progress is coming from the United States because of what it enables from a cultural standpoint.
And one of the great things we have today is that like we're more interconnected than ever, right? And with the open source movement, with even podcasts like this, social media, we can have these global conversations. And so we can learn how to use these tools. We can identify problems. People who have an opinion, strong opinion, are able to voice those opinions. And so as we have these conversations, some of which will be comfortable and some which uncomfortable, we'll figure out like where this goes.
I mean, like, let's get to the uncomfortable part. I mean, we talked about this even even in the email thread where Yohei talked about AGI and no specific definition for it. How do you guys personally define AGI? Because general is sort of, in my opinion, right now, if you talk about Claude itself, the model which they have made, it is way smarter than the average person. It's like it can teach you how to code and like teach you a programming language in like an hour. It's way smarter than the average teacher, I'd say even. So how do you guys define AGI, like personally?
I think that there's two contention points, I think, which is the term general and the term intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Some people, when they talk about AGI, they're talking about, a computer that can do everything every human can do, right? Which is, which could be general. Or, to me, if you're going to call it general intelligence, it almost feels like average. To me, linguistically makes more sense. But those are pretty different. And then intelligence, some people consider as like reasoning capability, right? So that's what IQ test measure, and that's how I would define it. But some people will say it's only AGI if they can do everything a human can, meaning they have to be able to like move stuff around, touch, and they have to have full multimodality. They need vision. They need all those kind of things. There's no question that, of course, humans' intelligence and reasoning capability that's been powered by visual input and auditory input is going to have, is going to have more capabilities than a purely text-based. But from like a practicality, engaging with it perspective, I think ChatGPT surpasses the average intelligence of people and capabilities of people. So to me, that feels like a definition of AGI that makes more sense to me. But that's also not the way people use the term AGI. So what makes sense to me when I think about the word AGI, I also understand is not how it's broadly defined. So that's kind of where I stand.
Yeah, I try to stay away from defining AGI because I feel like it's like love. Like define love to me. What kind of love? Like the love I have for my sons, the love I have for my wife, the love I have for my parents, the love I have for my job, the love, etc. And I know that seems like, no, but Andrew, come on. It's not like love. We're talking about, this is something we talk about all the time. How do we know we get there? But I think that's the beautiful thing about being human is we constantly move the goalposts for all things computer performance wise. Like the Turing test, if you look at it, I think we've passed that. I actually do like
there's no question there, right?
So also like if you look at like things like Eliza back in like the 80s where they'd had like and hacked together like these it was a computer system that was just the decision tree on questions on like a therapist, and people thought it was a real therapist in the other room. So what does AGI mean? I mean, like I said, I try to stay away from it. I think that's what's beautiful about it because it's going to keep us motivated. But like, what things come to my brain? Things like the ability to self-improve organically. That's pretty cool. Like it being able to continue to like self-improve. Its ability, I loved Yohei's point about the general. It should generalize. It should be able to generalize its input. It should be able to learn X about Y and then apply it to Z. So I think that and that's happening. That's happening. I would say versatility. But I think overall with it, I think AGI and how do we know we get there and what does it all mean? It's going to be impossible. And I think we waste a lot of time trying to fully define it because it's different for everyone. And yeah, I do think if you think about it, like, is the system, what does it mean to have a system be intelligent? Who knows? Like there was a quote, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, right? It can't, but if you put that fish in the water. So one thing that I play around with this is like when it can start to come up with its own creative theories that end up being correct, or if they're able to solve longstanding issues that we've had and that humans haven't been able to, And I have this wacky thing, so I'm going to just share it because it's been a thought in my head. So like Einstein works at a patent office and he sits there and he's reading all these patents, right? And then all of a sudden he comes up with the theory of relativity. But here's the thing, like, was it because his training data was all of those patents across all of those different domains? I think so. I think Einstein was kind of like an LLM trained on the patents that were at the cutting edge of its day in Austria, in Europe, and it all kind of coalesced into him being able to then condense across all that. And what did he do? He generalized, literally, right? It's like that's why I loved it. And like so anyway, that I why I bring that up is I think that's going to be AGI. Like when we have a new theory that occurs, maybe it's about space, and no doubt, what's probably going to happen is we're going to AIs are going to help us. These systems will help us become multiplanetary, and they're going to help us solve a lot of these big problems. And then that I think will be AGI.
But I mean, I think that just related to this question, it'll be fascinating to see how the linguistics around this evolves, because the linguistic itself often has such a big impact on how things play out. So
that's what like Peter Thiel talked about too. Like I don't know if you guys saw that he talked about linguistics having an advantage over people who are good at like abstraction knowledge and mathematics.
Yeah, he was talking about like linguists have more of an advantage. I was thinking more on the evolution of linguistics around how we define AGI, agents, AI tools. Those things I think will be fascinating. I don't know if I fully agree with Peter Thiel's specific thing, but I see why he said that, and I don't fully disagree with the points he's trying to make with that.
Shape rotators versus word cells.
Exactly. Well, now we can rotate words.
Yeah. Well, yes. And those who could rotate words before, I would say, are still at an advantage and maybe at the most. That's the thing. That's the cool thing, because whereas before, I think with calculators and some of the ways that we've been able to work with numbers, the advantage was more diffused. Whereas I think the advantages now will become more pronounced. Mm-hmm. But who knows? What do I know?
Yeah, I mean, it's like so much stuff is happening and no one knows what's going to happen.
Chaos is a ladder, right?
Yeah, of course. More than just ladders, like a rocket ship. But like, with so much uncertainty around and no clear definitions, why are they talking about regulating something that's not defined right now?
I'll take this one. People who have a job will do that job regardless of the need to do that job, and will want to interact and interject in things. And I don't know if you guys know about like bike shedding, very famously, groups coming together to be able to plan the development of a nuclear facility, and they end up spending most of their afternoon arguing about how big the bike shed's going to be, how many bikes go in it, how big the door should be for the bike shed, etc. And that's because that's something you can talk about. Whereas talking about parameters and talking about chip architecture and talking about, geopolitical like chip fab like issues are kind of over the heads of a lot of people who are in politics. And so it's the same thing that happened in the internet, unfortunately. There was like this move to regulate things before you understand it. But this has been the beginning of time. Like, for example, I don't know, this stuff people don't know about. Like when cars came out, some municipalities passed a whole bunch of rules that your vehicle couldn't travel more than 5 miles per hour because of lobbies from carriage manufacturers. And they said it was for safety. Literally, I mean, and that's the thing. So you're going to have those actors, but you're also going to have people who are of genuine motivations who want to make sure that things are safe. But I would say that this whole regulation push is the same thing that's happened since the beginning of time. The loom came out, and famously the Queen at the time didn't want to allow it to occur. And it's funny because the lowering of the cost of stockings, someone wrote that was inconsequential to her other anyways. Whereas for the everyday person, lower cost stockings were actually very important for them. But there was people who had expensive jobs, cutting wool, and shearers, for example, were very high paid and well respected and had enough money to have local political influence over what was going on. So they pushed back. So yeah, it's the same thing being played out, and it's like the Luddites again, and this happens every single time. But the neat thing about it, ultimately on the other side of it, is usually we get through it and society is left better off because of the technological advancement that occurred. Where a lot of people, I think, have this attitude, it's like, what does this mean? We're all going to be out of a job. It's like every single time this has occurred, if you think of every technical breakthrough right now, if you take the most, the destitute individual, maybe I would be so bold as to say perhaps the world, but let's go to the United States where I could really make sure I can land this plane. Their lives are better off than the most destitute individual 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, 200 years ago, 250 years ago, 300 years ago, all the way through. So yes, there's challenges, but they always end up leaving us better off.
Took the note behind on. Totally agree. I mean, on the that's another. I did a little research into the space, but yeah, if you look at technological advances, like almost, it's hard to think of one that's even close to killed more jobs and created more jobs, right? Like almost every single, like if you pick cars for example, the number of car mechanics versus the number of horse buggy drivers, like you can't even compare, right? So but it's hard to imagine what those jobs are going to be. Like we can sit here and list a couple that we think will happen, but likely there's going to be jobs that it's impossible to think of today that are going to exist 5-10 years from now.
I mean, the last question that I usually like to end with, like I've been into VC startups, programming, coding, all these things that are like 11. What do you think is one fact that will blow 11-year-old me mind?
If you take a fact that everybody in the world knows, which doesn't exist, but if there is a fact that everybody in the world knew, there's an average of about 385,000 people learning about it every day, because that's how many people are born every day. And I think that's just a fascinating way to think about it. Like you can never make fun of someone for not knowing something, because there's that many people learning about it every day, no matter what, no matter how well known. So I'll end with that one.
Andrew?
It's only gotten better for humans, and it will continue to get better indefinitely.
That continues to blow 15-year-old me mind. And I'm so glad we got the chance to do this. This was incredible for me. I learned a lot from this one, and I think that's from anything you'd like to say.
This was fun. This is a fun format. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great day.